So, in explaining how this affects him and what it all might mean, especially to someone who may not understand or may not particularly hold the same sense of the mystic as Jesse does, what he said to, and this is him relating this story, by the way, to Mr. Michael Pollan in his book, How to Change Your Mind. Pardon me. What he says, and here comes another very important quote from a very important pioneer of consciousness. To the extent I regard the experience as vertical, and about that I'm still not sure, veridical, sorry, what it tells me is that consciousness is primary to the physical universe and in fact precedes it. So he is talking about the idea that consciousness isn't in the brain. Which is the standard scientific belief that most scientists and many others who aren't scientists but adhere to that kind of viewpoint have built their belief system around. And so he says, consciousness is primary to the physical universe. In fact, it precedes it. He's not certain if consciousness consciousness exists outside the brain, he says, but to go from being very sure that the opposite is true, that consciousness is the product of our gray matter, to be unsure is an immense shift. And in this he agrees with what the Dalai Lama has to say on this issue about consciousness, and that brains create consciousness. And that idea that brains create consciousness is a metaphysical assumption and not a scientific fact. And if you can make that kind of breakthrough, which is the kind of breakthrough I'm talking about when approaching your ideas of political views too, to be able to not be quite so sure of yourself for a moment, that can bring a huge shift. Not saying it'll change anything, not saying that anything has to change, but just maybe, you'll have a deeper insight into what you're doing and what you want to support in the world, in your life, in your politics, and whatever else it might be. So, all right, then. That's our show for now. We'll have to wrap up. And for your meditation purposes, I hope that you will take what I mentioned, the idea of letting go, into your meditations and see what comes out. And I'd love to hear about it if you have a desire to talk about it. Thank you very much. See you next week.